All right. So we talked about flow control on Tuesday. If you guys remember, a lot of that dealt with comparison operators and getting set up with Boolean operators. And then what really mattered was the if, elif statements, understanding how those work. And an else, how many else's are required in an if statement? Chain? None, right? How many elifs are required? None. But how many can you have? All right. And then we have while loops and for loops. What's the difference between a while loop and a for loop? Anybody? All right. So a while loop is intended to be used indefinitely until a condition is met, right? A for loop is going to go through a finite number of times. So we learned the range command, and that range command is going to make sure that if I say from range 1 to 10, how many times is it going to go through? 9 times, right? Good catch. Because 10, it goes up to, but does not include, right? If I want to increment by twos and I want to go from a range from 1 to 10, what does my function look like?
110,
110, 2, right? So what are they talking about? Let's pull up idle real quick. All right, so if I have something like the range of 1, 10, you'll see that I get range 1, 10 back. So if I do for I in range of 1, 10, print I, you'll see that I get back 9 indications, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. If I want to go by twos, then it would be something very similar. So for I in range of 1 to 10, 2 is our stepping argument, and that's going to make sure that it counts by twos. But it's starting at 1, so it's only going to go up to 9, but never go above that, right? If I wanted to start at 2, so that it gave me all the evens, I could do that. Obviously, I'm not in the right one, so let's just have to retype it. Range of 2 to 10, 2, print I. Oops, typed that too fast. Two to 10, 2, print I. And you can see, if I can zoom this back up here, that you get those in there. All right. So those were I's. You had for loops, you had while loops. How do we get out of a while loop? What's that?
Break.
A break, right? So we could use the break command to get out of that. What is the other keyword that would tell us to keep going on? Continue, right? That would tell us to continue, keep going within the loop. All right. What kind of while loop would we use if we want to check input? And then once that input works correctly, we could use a break statement to come out of it. It's the one that I told you to always wrap your inputs in from now on. While true, right? While true means it's going to go on for what? Ever, right? The only way out of it is a break or a control C and crash your program, one or the other. Okay. What else we got? We got our break statements. We got our elif, continues, for loops for the range command. We talked about the range command. At the very end, we talked about import. So again, there are certain modules or functions that are built within Python. If you want to use an external library, you have to import that library in. So as we talked about here, let's just open up a new file. If I wanted to, say, use the random module to play with random numbers, I would use import random. And then down in my program, I could say something like number equals. Number is just a variable I'm choosing, right? It's just a name. Number equals random dot rand int, which means give us a random integer. And that would be between, say, 1 and 10. And on this, what are my possibilities?
1, 2, 9.
1 through 10. This is the tricky one that goes the other way. So this one goes up to the last one and includes it. All right. So rand int is going to be up and includes. Range is up to but does not include. I know it's tricky, but unfortunately, that's the way Python was written. All right. If we did this and we told it to print a random number, we could just run this as an example. You could see that it picked 4. If we run it again, it picked 6. Do it again, get 2. Right. It's just going to give us random numbers between 1 and 10. All right. You could also use things like random choice, which we'll talk about later on. Random choice, if we had a list of different things and we wanted to randomly pick one out of that list, we could use random choice to do that. I won't demonstrate that now because we haven't talked about list. So the main one you need to know right now is ran init, which is from the random module. Okay. Other modules that we may use is sys. So sys allows us to interact with the system. If in the middle of our code, we want them to end, right? So say we had a menu system, right? They press 1, they do this, press 2, they do this, 3, they do this. They press 0, it ends the program, okay? To that, we would use sys.exit. Sys.exit will end the program at whenever you have that executed in your code. So we could have something like while true, right? We could say print, press 1 for entering name. I'm just going to come up with a really simple program here. Print, press 0 to end the program. Okay. Then we need to do a check, or we need to get an input from somebody, right? So we're going to say choice equals input. This is just to get some input from the user. And then we would come back and do an if statement to check whatever they typed in. So if choice equals 1, then we could print what is your name. And then we could get the name from them, in which we would get that in. So this little choice here, we're going to do a while true here because we want to make sure they type in a name. Not for now. Disregard that. I'm getting too far ahead. So we're going to print what is your name. We will get a name from the user, input. Like that. And then we could print that name back to the user. You said your name was. Okay. If they chose 2, so we would use an elif here. So if choice equals 2, then we would print thank you for using my program. Print goodbye. And then we would call sys.exit, and that would immediately end the program at that point in time. All right. So let's put that there. We could have an else, so that if they type something other than 1 or 2, so else, let's print that is not valid input. Please try again. Okay. And if we do get their name and we get their program, we can now print ending the program. And then we could do a sys.exit here. All right. So let me walk you through what this little program is going to do. We have a while true loop, which means this is going to run indefinitely. All right. We're going to print the choices out to the user. They could press 1 to enter their name, or 0 just to end the program right away. All right. We get that input from the user. We're going to call that choice. The first thing we're going to do is check to see if choice is equal 1. Now, note that I'm using the string of 1, right? Not the integer of 1. If I wanted to check for the integer of 1, I would have to do what? Right. I would have to convert my choice to 1. And then this side would be 1 in order to make sure that converted. Does anybody see a problem with doing it this way? What if instead of me typing a number, what if I typed in random gibberish? Program would crash, right? So if we try this side and I type in gibberish, the program crashes because it can't convert that gibberish to an integer here. So if I go the other way and say, is my choice equal to the string of 1? Well, then if I type in gibberish, I'm not trying to convert it over to an integer. In this case, it doesn't match this, it doesn't match this, and it matches my else statement and prints that's not valid, as we can see down here. Because there's no way out of my loop, it starts the loop back over and asks them to start pressing 1 or 0. Everybody understand how that works? So you can do where you convert this over to an integer to check that they typed in 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. I don't encourage you to do that. Leave it as a string, because remember, every time you type something in on an input, it's a what? What data type? It's always a string, right? So if it's already a string, then you should just check it against as a string. Makes it a whole lot easier in your code. All right. So now we're going to check if they want to type in a 1. If I do a 1, it sends me to this block of code, right? Because I typed in 1 here. This became what? This condition equals what now? True, right? So because this is true, it's going to send me to this block of code. So the first thing it's going to do is ask me what my name is and allow me to type in my name. I hit enter. It printed out this was your name, ending the program, and notice the program exited out right away. All right. If we start back at the beginning and we check 0 for our choice, it says what? Not valid, right? Well, let's go back here and look. What does my code say? Should say 0, right? That's why we always check our code. So we run it back, hit OK. Now if we try 0, says thank you for using the program and exit. Everybody get how that simple little program works? We have our while loop up here. We have our inputs. We have if, elif, and else. If we wanted more menu options, say we wanted a 2. So we have print, press 2 for math. I don't know. Let's do that. All right. So then we need a choice 2. And let's put choice 0 at the very end. So elif choice equals 2. Now we want to do some kind of math. So we'll say print, give me a number, input, let's call this number 1. Get my fingers to cooperate here. And then we'll say, give me another number. So we're just going to copy this code. And instead of number 1, we're going to number 2. All right. And then we can print the sum of those numbers is, right? And then we're going to do string concatenation. Now we got to do a string because we're going to be dealing with integers. And we're going to take int of 1, right? Add that to int, or not int of 1, sorry, int of number 1. And we're going to add that to the int of number 2. And then we're going to stringify that whole thing, right? Because why do we have to stringify it?
Make it print as a number.
Right. So with print statements, we need to use string concatenation, and we can only concatenate strings together, right? That's exactly what you said there. So we can print that out, and then because this ends, we will get a choice. So if we run this, notice we got our, whoops, I forgot to close this off. There we go. So now we have a new menu. I do 2, says give me a number. Okay, let's do 5. Give me a number 6. And we can see the sum of those numbers is 11. Notice that because this ended and I did not have a sys exit, it just starts the whole program back at the top of this while true. All right. Now you notice we're kind of building out this little menu system, right? Well, we can make this a little prettier. So if we do a print and say we want to have a string here. So print, let's do asterisks. All right. or asterisk. Let's do pound signs. Say I wanted 20 pound signs to go across there. Does anybody remember the shortcut for creating 20 pound signs?
Time 20.
Times 20, right? And what is that called? Does anybody remember what a string times 20 is? This is string concatenation, right? What was the other one called? I want to create more of the same thing. Replication. So this one up here is called string replication. We want to replicate this string, which happens to be just a single or a pound sign. We want to replicate that 20 times. So what does that actually do? Well, that gives us a nice little somewhat looking menu. Looks like we need to be a little bit longer here. So let's go 20, let's go 30 just for the sake of it. We can also print this right at the bottom of this. We can do a print. And what do you see? Now we have some kind of cool little menu for our program, right? You can adjust and tweak and play and do whatever you want here, but it's starting to give it a little bit of a nice program look and feel. Everybody see how I got there? Real simple program. Is it necessary? No, but you're showing an example of string replication. You're also getting a feel for what it's like to build a menu system in your computer or in your program. And you're deciding whether they choose 1, 2, 3, etc. And you just do that with LF choices. Now, later on, we're going to talk about functions, in which case you would take this code and create a mini function for that. That would just handle your choice there. But for now, you're just going to have this really big, long program. All right. So that gets you on how to use imports. If we wanted to have a little choice in here instead that said guess or pick a random number, so we could do print, press 3 for a random number. Okay, we create a choice 3 down here. LF choice equals 3. We can now say print, I will pick a random number for you. Print working my magic, right? So now we're going to play with another module, and that one's called time. So let's import time at the top. And then here what we can do is we can call time.sleep. We're going to set this for 2 seconds. Right. What that's going to do is pause our program for 2 seconds. All right. Then we're going to say print, I have a number for you. It is, and then let's do random number equals random.randint. And we want to go between 1 and 10. And it is, and then we could just say plus random number. All right. Is there anything else I need to do with that last print statement? We could, but there's something wrong with this print statement. So it's picking a random number, and then we're going to concatenate that into this print statement. Random number's an integer, right? We got to convert that to a string so that we can actually do that. Okay. Now, when this is all done, it's just going to kick us back to the main menu. So up here on this number 1, I'm going to take out that sysexit so that the only time this program ends is when they pick 0. Okay. So we could do
I
a
want
run.
to spell choice better. I misspelled choice.
Yeah, there we go. See, thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we have 1, enter a name. I put in Jason. It says you said your name was Jason, starts the menu back over. I do 2, do math. Let's do 5 and 6. I get the sum is 11. And 3, I want a random number. Notice how it pauses for 2 seconds and then tells us the random number is 5. Okay, I hit 0, program ends. Real simple program. But we incorporated everything we've learned so far. We've done some kind of math with that. In this case, we did summing. We picked a random number out of that. Notice how that time.sleep just hung there for 2 seconds. So some people asked after class yesterday or Tuesday, they're working towards that text adventure thing that I was talking about for your midterm project or something. A lot of times you want to print text out, pause, let them read it, print more text out, not just flood the screen with a bunch of prints. How can you slow that down? You can use time.sleep to do that. Later on, after we learn functions, I'll show you how to write a cool little function that will put each little character like it's typing it on the screen kind of thing, as opposed to just dumping it. So, all right, anybody have any questions over this little project? Yeah. Here, I'll pull this out. Matter of fact, let me see if I can adjust this just a little bit. I know you guys can see it here, but that way I can get it all on the same screen. There you go. Now, one thing this little program's missing is what? Notice how I'm missing a whole lot of red. Everybody remember what red is? Comments, right? So we should be commenting little sections of this so we know what each little section does. And there's a benefit to doing that because, like I said, later we're going to create sub-functions so that instead of having all the code for choice 1 here, because this could be really, really long. Maybe choice 1 is entering your profile information, not just name. Well, then we got to collect their name, their phone number, their email address, maybe a bunch of other stuff, right? We may want to have a whole little sub program that does all that for us. And we'll talk about that here in the coming weeks. All right, did everybody get this? Okay, it's okay.
Like sometimes
You're talking about the spacing vertically?
just like sometimes I don't put a space and sometimes I
Like here and here?
just feel like random.
So like this doesn't matter. I can have a lot of space here. That's not a problem. However, spacing going left and right, that matters. So for example, if I have a space here on this print where there's extra space in here, it will crash and tell me that that's indented improperly. So that all has to fit in a nice, perfect line there. And the easiest way to get over there is hit your tab key. Yeah, some people were coming up after class on Tuesday with that issue. You always want to make sure those are perfectly aligned all the way down when they're on a certain block. All right. If I had a block within a block, so notice over here on the left-hand side, right? I have my while true. The first block is the first indentation. That's this line going down. However, when I hit an if statement, now it needs to be blocked over one more time. So in other words, indentation matters. And so what really happens here in this while true statement, right? It executes this code. Then it says is choice 1. That ended up being true for the example. Then it executes this code. Now that it executed this code, it goes all the way down below else and runs the line below that. There is nothing, right? So then it starts this whole loop all the way back over again. That's why the program functions like what you see. All really good questions.
I think the people online missed when you were talking about the midterm project. Could you explain that again?
Sure. You mean as to what we're doing for the midterm project?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So I didn't go into much depth there. All I was doing was explaining the different types of midterm projects and what you would see. So over time, and we'll cover that in great detail over the midterm project section, but students will do things like text adventure games. They may do small little programs that have meaning to them. Maybe something like this that actually, I don't know. I've seen where students built a roster application for a softball team, right? And they had to collect information and then it randomly chose who was going to what position and who was going to play in a starting lineup. The idea behind the midterm projects, and I'll show you when we get closer, is that it's something that you want to do. In other words, I don't dictate on your homework assignments and I don't dictate on your projects that you have to do something. Build me this, right? What I ask for is the requirements. I need it to have 2 if statements and an else statement. It needs to have a while loop and a for loop example in there. That's the kind of requirements I give you. What you do with that is entirely up to you. That answer your question there?
Yes, thank you. And then I was wondering about the homework from last week.
As far as it being graded,
Right.
yes, that will be graded by tomorrow. I
Thank
had,
you.
because we're a week in here, Friday is the last day that students can add. So I had about almost 12 straggling students that couldn't get signed up right away when classes started. So they all got added this week. I was giving them a chance to sign up. It's easier for me to grade 80 of those at once than it is to one piecemeal grade all those.
No problem. Thank you.
It's that when Tuesday's video will be up as well?
Tuesday's video will be up this evening. Like I mentioned at the beginning here, I had some technical issues with Zoom and I couldn't get things uploaded. I got it all fixed, so it should upload now.
Thank you.
Yep. And if you guys don't see that and you think it should be out there, email me, because sometimes I'll need that reminder that, especially where I have 4 sections, it should get posted to everybody's section. But if you don't see it in there, don't be afraid to email me. That's not a big deal. Let's see, a question popped up here. Enjoying the videos. Good.
I treated it to that line instead of like balance.
So it's probably wherever it says invalid syntax, it's probably the line above it. Does it tell you which line it's failing on?
It's just
Just a second. Oh, elif needs to be in the same line as if. So bring all those back once, and then you'll need to bring the inside back stuff as well. So here's a cheat. Instead of doing that, you can highlight all this inner code. Everything below that if statement, just in that block below it. So start with this phrase, we give you that number. Down, not up, but down. Right there, yep. Highlight that all the way to, whoop, too far, just before the other, there you go. Now hit shift tab, and that'll bring that whole block back. Whoops, shift tab should look the other way. It's not. If you go to edit at the top, should have. There you go, D-dent. That's the, it's a control bracket is how it do that. So notice how it shifted that whole block over. You can do that twice and it'll get it at the right line.
and those all have to be.
Yep.
there.
So to explain what she was having there, she had something that looked like this, where this was all kind of tabbed off a little bit. And so when you run this, you're going to get an error on indentation like this, because these if statements all need to be in a line going down. Instead of having to go to each one of these and tabbing them back, you can highlight all of these and then go to format dedent, and that will bring them all back one section. That saves you a lot of tabbing around inside the app. If you need to indent a whole section, you can highlight the whole thing, hit tab, and it'll shove the whole thing over. So that's a great one to know. If you look at the keyboard shortcut at the top, it will say use control and then the bracket. So control left bracket brings it back. See how I can shift it around? Oops, see how I went too far and now everything's to the left? That's a problem. So we'll go back and undo that. There we go. Yep, that's a great, like I said, this is where you guys start seeing those, and it's easier to show you how to fix that with the easy tricks there. Great. Anybody else have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, syntax error just highlights the LS. That's all it highlights. It's just
It's probably check for your alignment. Is everything aligned?
seems to be a line.
Give me 1 second. Yeah, this is.
And then
It's like it's the same, but it's
Even that whole element.
yeah. Oh, your LF needs to come back.
Yeah, your elif needs to match your if going down. So you see everything here to here goes straight down in a line.
Jason, I'm getting timed up. Before I go on.
You got to make sure at the very top you import time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Those are all great problems because that's easy to fix now. import time up here at the top. Now, when you import things at the top, you can do this where you have random, comma, sys, comma, time. Technically, for Pepe compliance, they now want each one of those on each line. So you would just say import sys, and then you would have import time. You can do them all on one line, but they want you to kind of break it up these days. So that's more of a good habit, not a have to do.
What was the, oh, that was the exit.
Yeah, so sys is used for sys exit. Random is used for random integer, and time is for time.sleep so that it pauses.
It'll pause for 2 seconds.
Yeah, because we put a 2 in here. You can set that to, 100 seconds. You could set it to 0.5, and that's a fraction of a second kind of thing. Whatever you want. Okay. So now that we have this little program, I'm just going to save that real quick, and we're going to start a new file because I want to get you guys a little bit of a jump start on your homework this week. So for this week, let's go back out to Blackboard. And remember, the easiest way to get started on these is to copy and paste this in. So we're going to start with a new sheet. We'll copy this and paste this in. Come all the way over here. Let's put some comments in front.
There's a lot of like misstatements.
And then at the top, we obviously want to make sure we have our initial comments. So we'll go back to learning modules and copy and paste these initial comments in. All right. So for those of you following along, I'll let you at least get to this point here. Oh, you're good. So again, what we did was set our initial comments up here. Please make sure you change this to assignment 2. You put your name here instead of Jane Doe. And then you copy and paste in all the requirements for this homework assignment. All right. And then I'm going to walk you through these kind of line by line to see how we would do them. This will be the last one where I really walk you through 50-60% of the steps. So homework 3, I'll walk you through about half of it. And then homework 4 is really kind of on you guys. There's videos for all those. Don't worry about that. I'm more worried about you guys understanding your midterm projects than I am the homework assignments, right? That makes sense. The homework assignments are to get you comfortable writing code so that you get to your midterm project. All right. So for this homework assignment, we want our initial comments. That's 1 point. We got that up here at the top. The next one says, use at least 2 different comparison operators. You can use one Boolean operator and or not, any one of those. Does anybody remember how Boolean operators worked? All right, so Boolean operators, when we did a comparison, for example, we checked on that other one that choice was equal to 1 or 2, right? 3, 4, etc. So that is the comparison operator there is equal to, double equal sign. If we wanted to check if something was equal to this and something was equal to this, and we only wanted to match that condition where both conditions are true, then we would use and to do that. If either one of those is true, then we would use or. And if we wanted the opposite, we would use not. So I'll give you an example of how that works. I'm asking for you to have at least one if statement, and it must contain 2 elifs and 1 else. All right. So that means something like what we just showed in this other app, where we had an if, we had 3 elifs and an else. Therefore, it would meet the requirement of the homework. That makes sense? All right. Then it says, write at least 1 while statement, that it must contain a break and a continue. So you have to show me where you would break out of it. You have to show me where it would continue. Now, remember, continue is implicit, but I'm specifically asking for you to put a continue in. All right. So you have to have an example of a break. You have to have an example of a continue. I need you to have a for loop that uses the range method. Just at least 1 for loop in the method that has a range. And then the very last point is to import the random module and generate a random integer somewhere in your computer program. All right. So to do this one, we're going to give the example of guess the number game. Okay. You guys can do whatever you want, but I'm going to give you a structure of guess the number game. Everybody knows how to play guess the number, right? And if you give them a hot or cold, if they're close, not close, that kind of stuff. All right. So let's do something like that. I'm going to leave these requirements at the top and then we'll go back and see if we matched what we needed. So in a guess the number game, we have to what?
Import the number.
All right, we have to at least generate a random number, right, for them to decide. So let's start with a random number. Let's call it number random or something like that. Doesn't matter what we call it here. We want random dot rand int. And we're going to play a game of 1 to 10, right? Does it all sound good? So 1 to 10. And you guys can change this. You can make yours go 1 to 100 if you want. All right, so we have a picking random number. Well, before we get that far, we should probably tell the user what we're doing, right? We want a good program. So let's give them some greeting. Let's say hello and welcome to my guess the number game. All right, print. You will need to pick a number between 1 and 10. Okay. So here we can say computer, whoops. Let's make a comment so we know what this is. Computer selects a random number. Okay. All right. Now we need to get a number in from the user, right? So we're going to have print, please pick a number. And we should probably do this in a while true, right? So while true, please pick a number, and we should probably give them the instructions between 1 and 10. Even though we gave them something up here, trust me, you want to tell your users more than once the instructions. All right, now we need to have them do it. So we're going to call this choice equals input. Yeah,
Can you slow down just a-
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, if I'm going too fast, even for you guys online, please tell me that. Like, I will type super fast. So,
Did we have to import the random?
yes, good catch. I was hoping somebody would catch that. So import random up here at the top.
Does it always have to be at the top?
Yes, all imports should always be at the top. And that will make more sense later in the class, but always put your random or your imports at the top. Imports is when you're going to use a module that's not built into Python itself. So we want to use the random module so that we can generate a random integer. So we import it into our program. The idea behind that is Python has a set of built-in libraries, which keeps your initial application super small, right? So if I compile this and turn this into a real program, it's really, really tiny. However, the more modules I add to it to do different things, then the program becomes more and more bloated as it goes out. Isn't a big deal for computers, but if we were putting this on a little tiny processor the size of your pinky, you know, the nail on your pinky, which we can do, it can't take and hold as much code. And we got plenty of time in class here, so I'll give you another minute or two here to get everybody caught up. Is everybody caught up here? How about online? Online, is everybody doing okay? Oop, I got it. There's
Almost finished.
okay. We got a couple here in class that'll catch up and then we'll go. I'm gonna leave this chat up here so I don't miss your guys' comments. If you guys haven't figured out by now, I fully intend the class to be, for those of you online, it's just like you're here in the classroom. So please come off mute, talk whenever. All right. So now that we have a print to the user to tell them to pick a number between 1 and 10, they type in a number. We should check to make sure that they typed in something that's 1 through 10, right? So what's the first check that we could use?
If number is like an if statement.
Yep. Use if statements. So if choice is what? greater than 0. Would that work? Right? So we could say greater than 0 and less than, do we want to use less than 10, Aaron?
Yes.
No, 11. Good catch. So we would want less than 11, right? Because we said pick a number between 1 and 10. If we put less than 10, then 10 would never count. So we would always want to check between those two. Now, so to do this check, we would say we want choice greater than or equal to 0 and choice is less than 10. Notice how we have to have that and in there, and we have to repeat our keyword of choice. Everybody see how we did that? Now we could simply at this point in the program just say, thank you for picking a valid number. Okay. If they didn't pick anything between that, let's give them a else at this point and say that is not a valid number. Okay. If they picked a valid one, let's break out of that, right?
That's not,
Yeah.
less and equal than 10, right? That's like.
Oh yeah, we changed that and then we changed it back. There we go. 11. Okay, is there any issues with this code that we have on the screen? The answer is yes. So who can find the code? What's that? We haven't gone that far yet. There's just an issue with my simple if statement that I have here. An int around choice. Good catch. So when we type in our choice, just because they're typing in a number, it's a string, right? So we have to convert whatever they typed in to an integer before we could figure out whether it's greater than 0 or less than 11. And the only way we can use the integers of greater than or less than, remember that only works on integers. We can't say, is this string less than this string? That won't work. The only ones we can use with strings are what? What's that? Other strings, but what kind of comparison operators can we use with those? So for strings, we can only use 2 different comparison operators. Either, well, we can't use plus because that would be an integer. So the only thing we can use are equal to, right? 2 equal signs, or we could use not equal to, which is an exclamation point and an equal sign. That allows us to see if it's equal to something or it's not equal to something. All right, those are the only 2 comparison operators you can use for a string. For numbers, we can use equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than and equal to. And if you need a reminder on what that all is talking about, if you go back to that yesterday, we talked about our comparison operators. It will remind you that only these 2 can be used for strings. Everything can be used for integers. Right? Anybody got any questions on that?
So the exclamation point equals was not.
Yes. It means not. So if I say something like, and we'll use that here an example. If we say if choice is not 2, then do some code. If it is 2, then it would do something else, right? So right now our code is very, very simple. We're going to save this and run just to see what we got here. And again, don't store this in your local file, pick something else. So let's call this Jason Zeller assignment 2, right?
We can keep these all in the same file, but just not different, right?
Yeah, you could please put them in like a folder that's called INF360, whatever. But don't store them in the folder that's the default. Because as somebody asked yesterday, they went to have to reinstall Python, and when they deleted Python off, it trashed all their homework assignments. Why? Because they stored it in that Python folder. So don't do that.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so if we look at our little program here, it says, hello and welcome to guess the number game. You'll need to pick a number between 1 and 10. And then it says, please pick a number between 1 and 10. So we say 11, right? And hit enter. And it says that's not a valid number. Please pick a number between 1 and 10. So how did we get that to come back again? Well, this is the reason I have everybody use while trues. One, we print it out to the user. We have an input. If it doesn't match, it starts this loop back over, asking them to pick the number between 1 and 10. If we didn't put this print inside the loop and we put it outside the loop, and we run this again, we say pick 11, it says it's not valid and then just goes right back to that input prompt, right? So it's a choice, and there's a reason that you may want it outside and you may want it inside on the loop. But if we did it the other way, it would at least give us the prompt to pick a number between 1 and 10. Here it just says it's invalid. So if you were going to do something like that's an invalid number, you probably want to have a very similar text to this inside your error message to the user. In which case, if I run that and I put 11, we say it's not valid, pick a number between 1 and 10, and it starts over. Right? If I pick -10, I also get that's not a valid number. If I pick something between 1 and 10, such as 5, it says, thank you for picking a valid number. And then at this point, we used a break to get us out of this while loop, and the program would continue. There's nothing there, it just ends. Okay. So a real simple check to make sure if this works. Now we can do some other checks and balances, right? So as you mentioned before, what if they pick the random number? Good call. So let's do that check first. So if we look at our if statement here, right? Let's do an elif, and we want to see if what?
Number random is equal to choice.
There you go. So if choice equals random number, right? Oop, number random. I don't know why I called it that way. Oh, I know why, so I didn't conflict. Okay. Then we can print, you guessed it. And then we could do something like sys.exit to end the program. We could say like exiting program. Okay. Up here, we need to make sure we import sys, right? Because we use sys.exit. And that allows us to go through. All right, now is this code going to work? And why?
Because it's a prompt. It'll find that the numbers within
We did
0, 10, and exit before it looks to see if it's correct.
Say that again.
It checked, it ends the program if the numbers between 1 and 10, but it ends it before it checks to see if.
Because of this break, right? So we want to kill our break here. All right. So in other words, what we probably want to do is not an elif here. And we probably don't even need to do this check. We need to do the opposite of this check, right? Does that make sense? So instead of doing the check to see if it's a valid number, we should do the opposite to see if it's not that. In other words, we flip this around. So if int choice is greater than 0, or less than 0 and greater than 11, now we can just say that's this, right? Put that up here. So if it's less than 0 and greater than 11, then tell them it's a problem. If it's inside of it, that's not going to match, right? This would not be true. It would be false, in which case it goes on to the next elif line, which is now going to check whether or not it matched the random number. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because the very first thing we want to do is check to see if the input that you're typing in is valid. So before we found out it's valid and we print, hey, it's valid. Well, that doesn't really do much good in our program. We should do the opposite to see if they typed in something that's invalid. So we could test this real quick. And I encourage you to always test. So -1, it just prints it again, right? So why is it just printing it again? It's because what? Aha, good catch. So now instead of an and, we should be using an or, right? We want not this one to be true and this one to be true. It should be either one of these conditions. If int choice is less than 0, okay, that makes it true. Great. Then tell them it's not a valid number. Or if int choice is greater than 11, then tell them it's not a valid number. So yes, we want to change our option to our Boolean operator to or at this point. So now if we run it and we say -1, now we get our expected output. It's not valid. Try it again. If we go 12, we can see it's not valid. Try again. There you go. That's it. I'm hoping for people to catch this stuff. So if we put 11, it accepts it, right? So now we got to tweak the way we ask this question, and it's no longer 11, it's 10, right? Right. We want to make sure we're checking for things outside of our normal range. Great catch. If I wanted to use 11, what would I have to do?
Throw an equal sign on the side of that carrot.
Absolutely. We could use greater than or equal to 11 and do it that way too. Both are perfectly valid. There's no right way of doing it. It's however you want to code your application. So you could use greater than or equal to, or you could just use greater than and then tweak your number on this side.
I have it, it just says it's like, please pick a number between 1 and 10, and I put like 4, and it says that's not a valid number. Like, what did I do?
Check your, do you still have and, or do you have a,
I put 4.
Yeah, same.
Okay.
Let's do this.
so or, and then check your symbols for 0 and 11. Are those the right symbols or do you have them flipped?
Okay.
We have them right, yeah.
Do you have an else at the very bottom?
Yes,
There's no more else.
there's no more.
Right? So the notice how else has gone down here because we're not checking for that case and we did the opposite of our original one. You don't have else?
Check. Settings.
Well, what do you?
Push 4. And now it just goes back to please pick a number between 1 and 10. Oh, I missed that one.
And so when you type in. Well, yeah, that's true. Look at the language on your if. Go ahead and minimize that. Look at the language that you have if that condition is met. You say, what? That's not a valid number. It is a valid number, right? So in your case, you have if it's less than 0 or your choice is greater than 51. Okay. All right, go ahead and type it. That's right. You're right. Go ahead and run your program. Try run it. There, you just have to kind of drag it on this. There you go.
Yeah.
Right, now you're hitting another line somewhere else. Where's your go ahead? That's starting the loop over because we don't have anything to kill the while loop yet, right? We killed the break.
Oh, is that what's going on?
Yeah, that's what's going on. Is you guys don't have a way out of your while loop right now. Does that make sense? So what right now is if we go through here and see what you guys have, say I picked 5, which is a valid number, it just starts the loop back over again. If I put this back inside, that would make more sense. Oops.
Yeah.
Put this back in here. All right, so if we run this, and even if they get a valid number, right? 5, it just starts the while loop back over again. So we need to do more than just say if this is invalid and it's choice, then we need some other catch-all down here, which we just haven't written those conditions yet. So our
You're gonna
app
have to-
starts
You're gonna have
over.
to typecast that choice too.
This one here, yes.
Yeah.
Yep, that was what somebody else said as we were troubleshooting the other one. Okay, so if this integer is equal to our random number, then we're gonna say you guessed it and we win. So if we came through here and we pick a 4 if that was the correct one, it would do that. 3, 2, 1, 6. There we go. 9 was our random number in that case, right? Well, that's not a very good fun game of guess the number. Let's do some other things. So we want to check right away whether or not that input's valid. If not, immediately have them restart the program, right? In which case we can say here and hit continue, and it would just restart them back over in the program. If they actually pick the random number, we'll then tell them they got it and exit out, right? Then we can do some other checks. Let's check to see if the int of choice is greater than the number random. We can print you are too high. And then we can pick again, right? What would it look like if they're too low? Yep. Actually, there we go. Number random. And we could have something like print, whoops, I messed something up there. Forgot my bracket on choice. Print, you are too high, low. There we go. Any other kind of checks we would like to do?
Equal. If it's even.
If it's equal to, we already have that one up here.
If it's even an integer.
That one will get caught by this one up here. Now you're right. The program's going to crash at this point if they type in a name or something, because we don't have a way of checking that at this point. We just have to assume they're going to type in the right thing. So let's play our game here real quick. If I put a 5, it says you are too lower. That's not good language. There we go. All right, a 5. I'm too high. So now I'm a 3. And I just happen to guess it. Right?
I guess it's.
We pick a number between 1 and 10 regardless. They're gonna even say you too high or too low. We know I have that.
Do you have this at the top here?
Yeah.
That means it's not matching. Do you have ints on each one of these? I'll have to take a look at that one. All right. So to keep us going here, because I think we have what, about 15 minutes left. If we look at this, now we played this guess the number game, right? But the problem with the way we have this set up now is it's pretty easy to eventually get the answer, right? So if I always pick 5, that always cuts the choices of 1 to 10 in half, right? Now I can figure out if I'm too low or too high. Now I know I'm too low, so let's try 8. And now I know I'm still too low, then when we know the answer is what? 9 or 10, right? So maybe we only want to give them 3 guesses in this, right? Let's make the game harder. You only get 3 guesses to go with this. So how would we implement that kind of thing within our code that we did here?
How are you? Because it comes in the beginning of the code, it comes up with one random number, and then you have to try to guess it over and over. So like, how does it stay like it keeps that one random number?
Because notice when we set our random number up here, that's outside of our while loop. So when you run this loop over and over again, anything up above is stuck from when you originally ran the code. If you wanted it to generate a random number every time, then you would have to stick that inside the loop. Yep, great question. So we have a good little program here. All right, we can say 5, we can say 3, and we can figure out the guess within a couple of them. Yeah.
So mine is like doing it out of order somehow. I don't like every time I guess the number, it doesn't feel wrong.
Okay, I'll come down and take a look at it here in a second.
Yes.
Let's see here. Guess came up. So why not convert choice to int? Do we ever use it as a string? That's correct. That's one way of doing it. So the problem with doing that, I'm assuming you're saying something like this up here. Is that what you're saying, Austin? Okay. Yes, you could do that, but that's a bad habit to get into, because later on, if we, when you know how to test whether or not it's one, that's going to put you in a pickle, right? The program's always going to crash. If they type in something else, your program will immediately crash there. If you check it here where you actually want to check it, then we can use try and accepts later. That's different code that I'll explain to you. Then we can check it down here. So the technical answer is yes, you can, Austin, do it up there. I'm saying don't do that because it'll put you in a bad habit for later on when we have a way of actually testing, did that user type in a number or did they type in text? Okay. And honestly, Austin, that's a learning lesson because I taught everybody the other way and then they kept messing that up throughout the semester. So I stopped teaching them that way. Yes.
Yes. We'll keep on repeating, like guessing the numbers.
We'll have to look at your sys exit there. All right. So for those of you with having trouble, I'm not brushing you off. I just have 10 minutes left with everybody on here. So let me go through this last little bit so you guys can see how this applies to your homework assignment. All right. And then if you're having troubles, I can help you here after class. Let's see. So what we wanted to do was make it to where they only get 3 guesses, right? So what's a couple different ways that we can do that?
Variable for the amount of guesses they have.
Great question. So we could say number of guesses. All right. I do like your answer, Aaron, and we're going to come back to that one. So we're going to go this method first. So if we say our number of guesses is 3, right? Then what would we have to do in our code down here in order to only let them have 3 guesses?
At the end of the too high or too low, you subtract 1 from the guesses. So that way the guesses.
Okay. So we would have number of guesses. I shouldn't be putting like that. So number of guesses. And we could say equals number of guesses. There's a short way to do this, but I'll show you later. All in due time. So -1, right? We would just -1 and then it minuses that one up there. So we would do that on both of these options, right? So if it's too high, too low, they burn to guess. Now, what's the last missing piece for what you just did there?
When guess equals 0, then tell them they have no more guesses.
Okay, when should we check that?
You can make like another while statement. Right under while.
Right up here at the top?
Well, guesses is greater than 0.
Okay, so that's one way to test it. So instead of a while true, we could say while number of guesses is greater than 0. That's a great way of doing it. Okay. Everybody see how this one worked? In this case, Austin, it's not plus, it's actually plus equals, but we'll go back to that. You're coming from C#, I can tell, or C++. You're not wrong. It's just a different language. Yep. Okay. So does everybody see how his solution to this problem was implemented? We set a variable up here called number of guesses. We adjusted our too high and too low to take that number of guesses and subtract 1, right? And then we changed our while loop so that we always check to see if it's greater than 0. If it's not greater than 0, then it doesn't run this while loop and the program would end, which means we probably need something down here that says something like you ran out of guesses. Thanks for playing, blah, 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 sys.exit.
And that doesn't feel.
You want it after your whole while loop, right? Because this while loop would end if they ran out of guesses.
We can have 2 sys.exits.
Yes. Yeah, because if this ends up being, it ends a program. Here, it's just ending the program. We don't necessarily need a sys.exit down here. It's good practice, but you don't need it. All right. So this is one way to implement it. Another way of implementing it would be instead of changing this from while true, right? And we keep our number of guesses up here, and we could subtract this. Another way of doing this, like Aaron mentioned is using a for loop. All right. And so this whole while true could be inside of a for loop, or maybe we just have all of our code down here inside of a for loop, meaning that we just give them 4 chances to do that. So that's one way of using a for loop. In order to do that, we go through guesses. The only problem with that way of doing it is if they guessed and they had an incorrect choice, that's still going to count as one of their guesses because we're not really decrementing it only on the valid options, right? So if we did something like, instead of a while true, we just had something like for I in range of 1 to 4, right? That gives us basically 3 times through the loop. Then we could execute this code. In this case, that wouldn't exactly be right. But the problem with doing this is once it goes through the loop, it takes off and goes to the next incrementer and goes through. So whether they typed in a valid number or invalid number, it would not decrement it. So this other option in this case would probably be a little better way of going about it. Another option is you can keep this while true up here, and you could just do a simple if check up here outside of that other chain to see if number of guesses is greater than 0. In this case, we could just say if number of guesses is less than, or in this case, what? Equal to 0. We can say the same thing that we said down here. You ran out of guesses and in the program. Now, when we do this, if we did it this way, as opposed to doing this number of guesses, right? We would just put this back to while true. We would want this if check before we ever printed anything to the user. So we would have to live somewhere up here. And the reason is otherwise it would tell them to pick a number, they pick a number, and it would tell them that you ran out of guesses even after they hit 0 in that number. Does that all make sense? 100 different ways to write this code. No one way is better than the other than this way seems like a pretty clean way of doing it. All right. Now, if we look at our homework assignment, we needed to have at least 2 comparison operators in our project, right? So let's look at our project. Do we have 2 comparison operators? Yeah, we have several, right? We have greater than, we have less than, we have equal to, and then we have greater than or less than, right? So we have 3 different options in there. We met that homework assignment. Okay. And it's 2 different comparison operators. For those of you that like to use 2 greater thans, that doesn't count, right? 2 different ones. You guys have 3, you're good to go. Use at least 1 Boolean operator. Do we have that? Yes, we have our or out here in the middle, right? Okay. We need to write at least 1 if statement that contains 2 elifs and an else. Well, we have an if, elif, elif, elif. We're missing an else, right?
Yeah.
So we could put an else there. What would we put for this else? When would this condition ever be met?
Someone doesn't type in the.
Well, the program will crash at this point.
Right.
The problem with this is that there's never an else, right? We set up these conditions in such a way that there's never going to hit the option of else. So we could print, I'm cool, and that'll never actually happen, right? There's no condition in which all of these fail and we get to that else. So you guys would have to create a condition in which this would fail so that that's a valid else statement. So what could we do to make that work? Bueller. Well, why don't we just strip out this one where it matches the number, right? Why don't we just take this code and we put this as an else, and therefore the only way we're going to hit this else is what? If it matched, right? Is that true? Is that true? If we move this down here, will that work?
Just took off the-
So the problem is yes, in this case it would. because if we get to the right number, say our number's 5, right? If we get to 5 and our random number is 5, well, then that is not less than, or it's not less than 0. So this is false. If it is greater than 11, that's false. If 5 is greater than 5, that's false, right? If 5 is less than 5, that's not true. Therefore, we would hit our else. If we were using equal signs here, that would be a problem, right? Because then there was a chance that it could equal our random number, but we're not. So let's test our program out here and make sure it works. Now that we made that tweak, let's do 5. I'm too high. Let's go 3. Too low means it's what? 4, right? We hit 4. You guessed it, and it ends. So now we have an if, we have 2 elifs, and we have an else. We have our homework requirement. Okay. Write at least one while statement that contains a break and a continue. All right. Well, we got a while loop here. We have a continue, but we don't have a break, right? So where could we put a break in this? Aha. So instead of using a sys.exit here, we could do a break, right? That will break us out of the while loop, which means it's going to say we ran out of guesses. Well, we didn't quite do that. So how could we fix our little check at the bottom?
If number of guesses
Yep.
is equal to 0, print.
There you go. If number of guesses is 0, print this, else print what? Let's move this exit program down here. And now we can just say you guessed it, and then it will say exit program out here. Does everybody see how we got there? Yep. So what we did was we stole the sys exit out of here. We put in a break, and we decided to put another elif chain in here to first check if its number of guesses is 0, which means they ran out of guesses, and they came over here and hit 0 to exit out. Else, we're exiting the program. In this case, it's going to automatically exit the program. And we could put sys.exit here if we wanted to, just to keep things clean. So one's going to tell them we're just exiting. The other one says they ran out of guesses and exited. So they will get a, you guessed it. We run our code to double check and make sure everything's good. Obviously my syntax is not, because if number of guesses equals 0. Does everybody see my issue? Not a parentheses. Nope. We want to be clear over to the left. There you go. It needs to be a double equal sign out here in the middle. All right. It's a really easy mistake to make. So now we run it. We get this. Let's try 5, too low. Let's go 8. 8, we're too low. It's a 9. You guessed it. Exit program. Still functions the way we had it, but by switching some things around, we can meet the homework requirements. Everybody see how we did that? If not, you will in the video. All right. So we have our while loop. We have our break. We have our continue, right? Last thing we need is a for loop with the range method. Okay, we don't have that in here. So what's a quick and easy way to do a for loop? I don't know. Just add something to the program that uses a for loop. So let's do something like for I in range of 1 to 3. That should give us how many loops? 2 loops, right? Let's print our asterisk, or I keep saying asterisk. Well, fine. Let's print an asterisk so I can say it right. Let's do an asterisk times 50.
You have to have that sleep.
Up here?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, anytime you go down to another line, you got to have that. So now if we run this, what does that little code do? Well, it just helps us print 2 little asterisk lines up at the top, right? We looped through it twice. We printed this once, printed it twice. And if we wanted, we could steal this same code and we could put this after this, and that makes it look a little bit like a program. where we get that at the top of our guess. Now, we probably want some white space after there, so it looks a little cleaner. So what we could do, if you just want white space to help align your program, just use a empty print, right? And we could do a print and we could do 2 of those. And that will give us a little bit of white space after our header. Now we have this nice little header up here at the top, and then it comes down and asks us to start the program. Is that the best use of a for loop? Probably not, but it does meet the requirements. The idea is that you needed to use the range module. The very last part of this is that you needed to use an import from the random module, and that you needed to create a random int. Well, that's the first thing we did right here, right? So this homework assignment, or what we have typed here, will cover all of what's required in the homework. All right? So you don't have to do this. Tweak it. Make it a game like she was doing from 1 to 50 instead of 1 to 10. And play with a bunch of different checks out here in the middle. Maybe you don't want just greater than or less than. Maybe you want everything between 1 and 20, say you're way too low, or something else, right? Maybe it's a homework assignment or a grade thing, and it has nothing to do with guess the number. Yeah. Just this part here.
Yeah, up more. With the range thing.
Yep. All right. How about people online? Did you guys understand this one? Anybody have any questions? Let's see. Should all if statements have an else, or is leaving elif still good practice? Yes. Again, an else statement is not required. You only need that if you have a condition that matches. So the only reason we changed what we did here was because the homework asked us to have specifically 1 if, 2 elifs, and an else. Otherwise, if it wasn't inside this homework, you could do something else. All right. In your homework assignment, you may have way more than this. Maybe you have 3 games in your homework assignment, which means one has an if and maybe 1 if, or 13 elifs and no else. All I'm looking for is this exact chain. At least has 1 if and 2 elifs and an else. You could have 40 elifs in there and you would still meet the homework requirement. Anybody have any questions on the homework assignment? Yep. No, you're good. All right. Then I will end the
I have
video
one quick
here.
question. I have one
Yeah,
quick-
go ahead.
How do you check if a string was entered is supposed to be a number? Like, how do you check it if you're asking for input?
Uh-huh.
How do you check if the input is text and not a number?
At this point, we don't know how yet.
Okay.
We will very shortly. I know it's annoying. I just don't want to get too far ahead because that's a whole section of that.
Okay.
But we're getting closer to that. Right now, we can at least check if it's converted to a number, is it this? Otherwise, the program's going to crash, right? So for now, I type in gibberish, the program crashes. Once we get to a certain point, we will be able to do that check, and therefore your homework will require that you always have that check in there.
Okay.
For example, like your midterm projects, right? I will intentionally be trying to crash your midterm projects. I'll be typing in gibberish. I'll be typing in all sorts of stuff to try to see if I can get it to crash. If the program crashes, you lose points. Right? If it's a full-blown crash, it's 20 points, boom, gone. Now, it turns out you can get those points back, right? But that's what I mean. So what does that mean? That just means you have to run through your program, let your kid run through it, let a roommate run through it, and have them type in gibberish, right? If your project gets too big, well, then don't do extra features that could cause it to crash, right? You didn't finish coding this part, leave that part out for your midterm project, finish that in your final project. We'll talk a lot about more of this in the midterm project. But same way in your homework assignment, if you were trying to do something cool, that's fine. But if it didn't work, don't include it in your homework assignment. Just comment it out and say, I tried to get this part to work. Unless it's a requirement, right? You know what I mean? All right, I will get this video posted right after the class right after this, because I go straight into another class. I will get it posted after that, and I will get Tuesdays posted up there. All right, and you guys should get announcements I'll send an announcement out to everybody's Blackboard shell that it's up and going. We will see everybody on Tuesday. Let me double check that. That should be correct. Oh, I will send an announcement out but everybody that's on this call, October 3rd, we will not have class. Okay. I'll send an announcement out and all that just as a reminder, but just so you guys know ahead of time, October 3rd, we won't have class. On Tuesday, we cover the next content, which is functions. And that's where things will make a little more sense as to what we were doing today. All right. Functions is a key part that some people glaze over, and that is the number one thing they miss on their midterm project. So please come to pay attention on Tuesday.
Because if we, it should have.
Good news is you're done with homework assignments till after the midterm. All right. You did last week's homework assignment. You have this week's homework assignment. The next homework assignment isn't until after midterm. You have a quiz. You have a quiz in there, but you do not have homework assignments. So get your first one done. If you haven't done it already, I'm going to try to get those graded tomorrow. You should see grades no later than Saturday. And then this homework assignment will be due on Sunday, and I'll get that graded as quickly as I can. It'll be faster than the first one. All right. Thanks for everybody online. Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for jumping in. And Austin. And everybody else that did too. All right. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.